Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the NCT and NTC podcast. This is our second episode. I'm so glad that you guys have taken the time to join us on another podcast. In this installment, me and the other 5 members of the No Trade Clause team are going to be discussing our mock trade deadline exercise that we conducted last week. So we're going to be talking about some of our personal experiences with it. We're going to talk about some of the big trades that we conducted, executed, some of the ideas we had, objectives, the whole nine when it comes to the exercise. So basically what I wanted to do here to start off, I mean, if you guys listened to episode 1, you know, are familiar with Anil and Oliver and the duties they kind of handle on our website for No Trade Clause. But we have 3 new members here that were not present on the last episode, and that is Ali, Chanel, and Aram here. So I wanted to give them the opportunity to tell you guys exactly how they contribute to No Trade Clause. So Ali, if you wanted to start us off, man, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners just kind of what you've done for No Trade Clause here so far. Kind of what role do you play for us here for the team?
Yeah, man. So, yeah, my name is Ali Shafiq. 1/6 the No Trade Clause. I kind of find myself as like a Swiss Army knife. I try to help out in terms of with the social media graphics, graphic design, free agent lists. Try to just be a help as much as I can with anywhere that I need to be, whether it's managing the website itself, content, managing the writers as well. So that's pretty much what my role is.
Awesome, Ali. You guys are going to notice a theme here. We're all we like to be well-versed in multiple areas here. We're all kind of versatile in a sense. So that's definitely something we pride ourselves on here at NTC. Chanel, how about you? How have you kind of contributed so far here for us with NTC during your time here?
Yes, I've been able to support and voice my opinion mostly, but I also help to manage the writers and just support wherever I'm able to.
Awesome. And Chanel is a brand new agent here just as of today. So we are all extremely happy for her. And we're sure that huge opportunities are going to be coming up as a result of that that just occurred here today. Aram, how about you, man? You want to chime in here real quick for us?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for this. I'm excited to be part of this podcast. I'm excited to be part of the team. I personally spend most of my time managing the 30-team cap sheets, just trying to get transactions up to date and just like have the best, most accurate cap sheets in the game.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something you're going to see here for us. If a trade goes live, a buyout, anything like that, you're going to see it on our cap sheets straight away. I mean, I give it about maybe 2 or 3 minutes tops for Rob. He definitely works quickly over there with the Google Sheets. He definitely knows what he's doing over there. But basically, what we wanted to accomplish to do this mock trade deadline is really just kind of give all of us the opportunity to really apply some of the things we've learned. We've been doing so much work behind the scenes for No Trade Clause. This is really an opportunity we had to kind of put the pen to paper, so to speak, really hit the ground running and apply some of these themes that we've had. You know, we've seen some trades go down in the NBA. We've seen the buyouts occur, things like that. So we really wanted to kind of take that and run with it, some of these concepts, and just give us another opportunity to kind of come forward with you guys, like kind of live and really kind of be out in the open, so to speak, through this exercise. We all learned a lot through this. We all had some kind of unexpected situations come up, but I mean, most of all, we really all had a great time doing this. So we hope that through our experiences, if you guys are thinking about doing this yourself, or you had any questions about this would help kind of address some of those maybe concerns or questions that you have as a result of this. So Oliver was really our architect of this whole project. He really came up with the idea, and he really gave us the outline, the skeleton of how this is all going to work and how things were going to work and when it was going to happen. So Oliver, what was kind of your inspiration behind kind of making this happen? And then, maybe tell the listeners a little bit about the timeline we kind of followed and the resources we used during our time doing the mock trade deadline.
Sure. So I'll start off by saying that I don't really want to take credit for it being my idea. It was Aram's. He just threw it out in our group chat one day, and I kind of just ran with it. But I took what he just mentioned about, hey, let's do a mock trade deadline. It'd be a really fun opportunity for us to apply what we've learned. And I just kind of dove in headfirst on how we can structure the project to make it as realistic as possible and have it also have some gamification, have it flow, maybe create a little bit of competition. But yeah, I guess I'll get into now what the structure is. So first, starting off with the team selection. We, as a group, decided it would be most efficient for the project if we divided the 30 NBA teams into buyers and sellers. Granted, there were more buyers that we determined than sellers. So we kind of had to make like a middle group of teams that we considered both buyers and sellers. This criteria was determined based on on-court performance, tax or cap positioning, and then any current trade rumors that were going around. So some examples of buyers that we deemed were teams, that are playoff title contenders, Brooklyn, LA, or teams that, are underperforming and definitely need a spark in, a deficient part of their team like Miami or Boston. Some sellers that we had listed were teams, bottom of the tables that had assets, whether they were expiring or still on lengthy contracts that can be moved to help one of those teams at the top of the table, like Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Detroit. These are some of the teams that we've been hearing in trade talks over the past few weeks that we deemed they are the most likely to be active at the deadline. And then there were the few teams, as I mentioned, that we kind of went back and forth on that were up for debate. Utah was an interesting one, given that they had the best record in the NBA this year, and they are $1 million over the tax. And I actually had the Utah Jazz, so I wrestled the whole exercise with trying to get them under the luxury tax without messing too much of their mojo up. Another team was Toronto and New Orleans. They're both, in the playoff hunt. They've got some assets that are in trade rumors. So they really could have gone either way. They could have tried to bring players in to solidify themselves, solidify their playoff positioning, or they could have sent some players out to bring in future assets. So we took those teams that were in the both category, and we shipped about half of them off to the buyer's side, half of them off to the seller's side to even out the numbers a little bit. And we split our team in half, whereas 3 of us took on teams that were buyers, 3 of us took on teams that were sellers, just to hopefully facilitate negotiations. So that way, you don't end up in a situation where you feel like you have no one to trade with. Mm-hmm. And we made those team selections just like as you would think of any like fantasy draft, snake style. So that's how we chose the teams. For the negotiations, we had 2-hour negotiation periods. We used Zoom. We each had our own breakout room. So if you wanted to talk to a specific person, you would go into their breakout room and chat for approximately 10 minutes. We tried to have a 10-minute cutoff, so that way, you can engage with multiple people throughout the negotiations. And I think one of the biggest things for this exercise was we wanted to restrict our resources as much as possible. We wanted to only use what we have worked on and, things that we feel are extremely credible. Like we used our website. That was where we got all of our cap figures from, where we got all of our draft capital. We used the trade machine that Anil worked on to verify everything that we were doing, make sure, it would go through just as if this were a real life exercise. And then NBA stats, just because obviously, when you're going through this kind of stuff, you need to have the numbers to back up your decision making. But yeah, that's kind of what that's the skeleton of the exercise, and I think it turned out really well. If I were to do it again, there are a few things that I would adjust, but I think we'll get into that a little bit later. So.
Oh, for sure, Oliver. We have some things. I'm sure we all have some regrets through the exercise, and we have some recommendations if we're going to run through it again. But ultimately, it was a very fruitful exercise. And as a result of that, we gathered a lot of great data, a lot of great numbers through the various trades that we made. So I know a few of these guys here have gathered some numbers, gathered some data, really great points as we get through this exercise. So maybe Aram or Lee, one of you guys want to maybe speak on some of the numbers, the data you gathered that we kind of compiled following the conclusion of this exercise?
Sure. I'll let Ali explain first, and then I'll just add on to it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so as you know, there were 6 GMs total, 16 teams involved in trades, 43 players traded in total, $317 million moved. There were 6 first-round draft picks on the move, and also another 4 second-round picks that were moved as well.
So yeah, as you see, more first-round picks moved than second-round picks, which is sort of rare these days. Usually you see like little trades go down here and there involving second-round picks. But, we're big-time GMs. We want to make big-time moves for our teams. So we move those first-round picks around. And I just think it's quite impressive, like the number of players we moved, total of 43, 16 teams involved. And we all did that in like a span of 4 hours total. So I'm really proud of this group for putting it all together in such short notice kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really incredible how it all worked out. And then, Anil was the architect, as Oliver mentioned before, of a trade machine that we hope very soon will be available for people to kind of tinker with. And it definitely demonstrated his knowledge of, Excel and all that stuff. I was really blown away. I didn't know you can do some of that stuff with that program. So kudos to him for making that happen. It made our experience so much easier just trying to move players around the league. But we gathered some great numbers, some great data. So what I wanted to do now, for all of us have the opportunity to do, is really just give our thoughts on this exercise. So this is where we kind of get into our general thoughts on everything. So, we want to speak on the difficulty of everything, maybe some of our expectations going in, our excitement. So really, just kind of start us off going into it. As far as difficulty goes, I really saw this. I think it was easier than it could have been with having things like our cap sheets, and the trade machine really kind of made it easy for us to facilitate trades, and it happened almost instantly. You add in Google Sheets and everything was just kind of like spur of the moment. We wanted to make a deal and it was done. And that allowed us to make multiple deals in a short time span. Oliver mentioned just a few minutes ago that we did all of this in 4 hours of negotiations, which for you guys out there may seem like a long time. It's really not. Time can really get away from you when you're doing this. And I think that's one of the takeaways we all had after doing this. We kind of got to the end of the first night and we said like, wow, it's 9 o'clock already. There's no way we're at the end of this exercise for the night. It really just is incredible when you're into in-depth discussions. But wanted to open up the floor to anybody that wanted to kind of speak on this further. Maybe Chanel, you didn't really have any actual trades in this exercise, but you were still in a majority of, you were in tons of discussions and negotiations. So like, what were some of your takeaways from this exercise, or maybe like some of your, what did you think about this going into it? Did you have any concerns, or, how excited were you to do this? Like, how was it for you kind of going into this for the first time?
Yes, I definitely enjoyed this experience. I went into it very excited, thinking that I was really gonna make a big difference. And, I learned that you guys are really some really good negotiators, and I really think that all of you will make amazing GMs or agents as the time comes in the very near future. But I really tried. I thought I was going to do more than I did, but I realized with the contenders that I had, they were really kind of stretched to the limit. And so there really was not a lot of room for movement. I tried to get as creative as I could, but unfortunately, I just couldn't make a deal that was good enough for one of you to bite on.
Yeah, and that's something that comes as a result of having certain teams, because every team has different objectives, and I think that's something that you encountered, Chanel, as a unique situation to you, and I'm sure we all had situations like that that we encounter, because every team is different GM, different roster, different objectives. So it's something we ran into. So, how about, Ali and Neil, how did you guys feel about this exercise going in? You going to give your thoughts real quick on maybe some unique circumstances you guys face as a result of the teams you were given in this exercise.
Yeah, so I can talk to that definitely. So for me, keeping track of 6 teams was pretty difficult, and it was more challenging than I initially thought. So as Oliver was explaining, it was broken into buyers and sellers. The buyers had 6 teams each, and the sellers had 4 teams each. Well, I was finding it pretty challenging to keep track of, okay, I had Denver, Philly, Boston, Indiana, New York, and New Orleans. So what I had to do is prioritize the most important decisions. So I had Philly. Okay, can I get Kyle Lowry? That was top priority. I had New Orleans getting some value for the expiring contracts of Lonzo Ball and JJ Redick. That was a top priority. Making sure I'm aware of all the expiring trade exceptions and disabled player exceptions. That was really important as well, because when they go, they're gone. And then in addition, trying to pull off a big fun trade like from Denver, trying to see if maybe we could swing Michael Porter Jr. for something interesting if the right deal was on the table. So I was finding it like it was a juggling act, and I needed to also be organized with when I get time with a specific GM. So when I get time with Oliver, well, I need to know what trade targets I have for every team that like corresponds with Oliver. So it took a lot of organization. And then the last thing I was going to say is I realized how much history dictates the market value. And what I mean by that is so many times when I was in trade negotiations, did I hear people say, well, did you see how many first round picks New Orleans got for Drew Holiday? Well, that's like, that should show you how many first round picks we want in our trade. So it was very interesting to me. And I bet in the NBA for real, that probably does happen.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. And, those are things we encounter. History does play a big part. I had a question actually here for Oliver, because he had, the Cavaliers as one of the teams he managed, and he had Andre Drummond as a part of a lot of negotiations and try to make a deal with various people. I was one of them. You tried to pitch me a deal for Drummond. I declined, but he eventually was moved in a separate deal. How was that for you, Oliver, with a guy that, was moved for pennies on the dollar, last year with being moved? I think it was like, a second round pick or two. It seemed like his value might have been affected by that. Like, did you find yourself having to navigate against kind of like that prior deal, or was it like a brand new slate for you trying to move him?
Oh man, I pray for Kobe Altman and the people in that front office right now. But it's moving Andre Drummond. I tried as much as possible to not think about what the Cavs got from Detroit, or what the Cavs gave to Detroit rather for Andre Drummond. I went in with a clean slate, went to the teams that I felt had the best opportunities for salary matching. That's why, Aaron, you and I spent a ton of time talking. You had Dallas. Dallas has a bunch of contracts above like $12 million that would have been great for salary matching.
Right.
And I know you were interested in a big man, swapping out some of your big men. But I ultimately did get a deal done. Hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later as well with my man Ali. But yeah, it was tough. And as happy as I am, I got a deal done. If we're looking at reality here, I don't see the Cleveland Cavaliers getting a similar return to what I got for him.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's gonna be difficult to manage going forward.
Yeah, he put me up against that timeline, man. And once that time got, one of the things that I learned was deadlines really create pressure. And I was up against no pressure at all to trade for Andre Drummond at all. Like I wasn't even thinking about Andre Drummond. So as a GM managing the Raptors, he came to me and, we got a deal done, but it's crazy how much, the fact that like we had 5 minutes left, and it was that reason alone that in my mind, for some reason, that I was like, oh, shoot, I got to get a deal done. Not the fact that, oh, why am I talking to the Cleveland Cavaliers about, no offense to Andre Drummond, I love Andre, but it's just like I didn't need him at all. And the fact that like I just, was adding salary left and right or trying to make a trade work when, frankly, I didn't need to. So deadlines and cutoff times, that stuff really matters. That changes the game for sure. But what was really interesting was like how the market played out in terms of the buyers and sellers. Like as a seller, you have such a you have a great understanding of what you need to do for a seller. Now, mind you, it's different for every team, but for the most part, you're either using your salary cap space for like to gain assets as a dumping ground, or you're trying to just unload assets and salaries to gain back assets as well, like draft picks. And so, like for me personally, as someone that had teams that were sellers, like I had a very clear objective for each team. And that made it a lot more easier than I think the teams that had buying teams, for sure. So
nice, Ali. And while we're in this, while you're speaking on that, some of those trades you made, I mean, I think it's a great time for us to actually go into the deals we made. The actual like our objectives for the teams we managed. So Ali, you spoke on that Drummond trade. And then we actually had a trade that was probably one of the highlights of our mock trade deadline, and that was the Tyler Hero exchange, where you got Tyler Hero, Avery Bradley, and Myers Leonard from the Heat in exchange for Oladipo. That was a huge deal. So, did that fulfill the objectives that you had going into it? Your strategies, were you looking to get rid of Oladipo, like no matter what it took, or was that just something that kind of came up? Because I remember it coming to you about it. So, like, was that a priority for you getting rid of Oladipo, or was it just something that kind of manifested itself through time?
It was a priority for sure. I had no allegiance to Victor Oladipo. I felt like I could get a great return for him. So when you came to me, I felt like we obviously had mutual interest. So, but the conversation really turned when you brought up Tyler Hero, because I wasn't the one that brought up Tyler Hero. I was like, oh, shoot. Okay. All right. So Aaron really wants him. Okay, that makes sense. And, we pulled the trigger, and I was a bit surprised that I was able to snap Tyler Hero for him. But, we both sides got what they wanted, and I think we got a pretty solid, good deal done. I think Houston maybe more so won that deal because we did have Miami over, Miami did want him badly. So, and they've been rumored to, get him for quite a while. So, that was definitely a fun trade for sure.
Yeah, it was. It was fun negotiating. When you have mutual interest, it always makes things a little bit more interesting. Just trying to get that deal done. But bringing this over to, I wanted to give Chanel a chance real quick, because she didn't really conduct any actual deals, but she was close to, I believe, acquiring Andre Drummond, who was just talked about a little bit earlier. So, Chanel, what were your objectives, and what were you looking for going in? I mean, I know you wanted Batum. We discussed him multiple times. It didn't really happen that way. But any other deals that you were close to closing besides Drummond, or how did negotiations go for you?
They went pretty good. I think I had conversations with generally everyone. It was really interesting, though. I think the Lakers were kind of like my priority. Just because I feel like they are in win now mode. Like some of the other teams, they may be able to win in the future, but I feel like the Lakers have like a really tight window and they've spent all this money. So they were really my focus. I had some conversations with Oliver about Andre Drummond for Spencer Dinwiddie, as the Nets obviously looking to get better. There is a gaping hole. Well, maybe now not that Blake is there, but there are some defensive issues that they had. And so we were kind of thinking that maybe Andre could help Brooklyn to make a run at the title. So we got really close, but I just could not let DeAndre go because I just knew in real life that they would not let DeAndre go because they would lose, the locker room. So I wanted to just try to be as, I guess, realistic as possible as I could. But I also talked to Anil, tried to get some deals done. We talked about JJ Redick. We talked about Lonzo Ball. I even almost gave Ali Mikal Bridges on a sweet deal.
Listen, you brought up Mikal Bridges. I was tripping out. I was like, all right, if we want to have this conversation, we can have this conversation, But
it was great. It was really great for real.
Awesome, Chanel. So you mentioned, Lonzo Ball was almost somebody that you acquired. He did ended up getting moved. Oliver, I believe, had a deal with Neil that sent him to the Golden State Warriors. So, Oliver, to you, for a second, maybe talk about that Lonzo Ball deal. Did that fulfill some of the objectives and goals you had going into this exercise? Aside from the whole Andre Drummond situation.
Most definitely. I made that trade with Andre Drummond, but this was by far my favorite trade because it just, when Anil came to me and told me that Lonzo was on the table and he was interested in Oubre, I felt like I had to find a way to make it work because I just thought to myself, like, okay, the way the money worked out is I was able to lower my tax bill as Golden State a little bit this season, which was a nice plus. And I received a player that, in my opinion, fits way better with that offense in Lonzo Ball than Kelly Oubre. So he would have helped this season. And then next season, assuming that we're able to make a run at him in his restricted free agency, I imagined a starting lineup of Steph, Lonzo, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and James Wiseman. And I just that was a wrap for me. I was like, all right, I got to get this done.
I like it.
So I just figured, okay, maybe if we try to bring in Lonzo before he enters his restricted free agency, we could kind of pitch him on the culture, pitch him on, his long-term future with the club. And it'll only stretch the window of opportunity that Golden State has. We thought they would be done, for quite some time since back starting in the 2015 season when they first won. But here we are still talking about them, and they are in a position to continue to make moves to keep that window of opportunity open. And I think if they were to actually get Lonzo Ball in real life, that window would stay open for quite some time.
Dude, that's a guard rotation that's incredibly dynamic. You're looking at a combination of shooting, defense, and passing that's, not many teams can rival. So I see why you did that deal, and that's super exciting. Maybe that'll happen in real life. We'll have to keep our eyes open. Trade deadlines around the corner. You never know in this league. But, if you guys thought that those deals were dynamic, we talked about Oladipo already getting moved, Tyler Hero. You haven't seen anything yet. We have yet to get to the biggest trade that was executed in our exercise, and that was a Bradley Beal trade. So we got to know how this went down. Anil, Aram, speak on this deal, guys, because that was our blockbuster. That broke the internet. That's our Woj bomb of the day. So, how did that come to be? We got to know about this, man.
So in this exercise, I was able to make 5 trades. This one was by far the most difficult and complex. And I knew it was going to be a difficult trade, and it was a little bit more difficult and complex than I thought. So right off the bat, I tried to give Aram the impression that, hey, you know what? Denver's interested in Bradley Beal, but we're not really looking to move Michael Porter Jr. So at least when MPJ was eventually brought into the trade discussion, it at least felt like, I was making a concession and going out of my comfort zone a little bit. Well, to the surprise of nobody, Aram quickly brought MPJ into the deal as a centerpiece of the deal, but we knew it would take a lot more than that, especially to make the salaries work. Bradley Beal makes a lot of money. So to make the salaries work, Denver had to also include Will Barton, JaMychal Green, RJ Hampton, P.J. Dozier. And still, Aram was like, yeah, that's just not enough yet. And I didn't have too much more. So Aram wanted some quality draft picks, right? And that was going to make things a little bit difficult because of the Stepien rule. Denver, and we realized the importance of draft capital, which I think we all already knew. But, when you're making a trade, it really makes things difficult, right? And that's why in the other trade, Tyler Hero had to get moved because Miami has no draft capital. Mm-hmm. So Denver only has 2 first-round picks available that they could move. 2021, which is not going to be a great pick because we know that they're going to be a top seed. And then the 2027 pick, which is quite valuable if it's unprotected because it's so far out, anything can happen. So I offered all those players, those 2 picks that I could put out there, and Aram just couldn't make it easy for me. And he told me, you know what? I like the trade, but I don't love the trade. So in order to pull off the trade, I need 3 first-round picks, even though he knew I only had 2 first-round picks. So
Rom, you're
I had to make life difficult for you, man.
yeah, and he did. So he made me go out, do some work, and try to go and acquire another first round pick. So I went to No Trade Clause's draft capital page and clicked through every single team. Like, who has a draft pick that I can get for something? Because I don't even have many assets left. So how am I going to get a draft pick? So we went to Ali, who had Houston. That was a no deal. Like, we tried and we tried. We eventually had to turn it into a 4-team trade. So I'll pass to Ram. Maybe you could talk about the 4 teams that were involved.
Yeah. So as Anil mentioned, I had to get every little bit of draft capital to give up Bradley Beal, because we've seen what James Harden got. We've seen what Drew Holiday got. So yeah, I just couldn't settle for 2 first-round picks. I think I would have looked pretty bad as a GM in that scenario, and I might still have not asked for as much as the Wizards would ask it for him in real life. So okay, let me bring in the other 2 teams we got involved here. The other 2 teams involved are the OKC Thunder and the Boston Celtics. Anil and myself are the GMs of those teams as well. So Anil was able to get a first-round pick from the Oklahoma City Thunder, I believe, and then or that had to be rerouted to Washington, if that's correct, right?
Yeah, so OKC had an abundance of first-round picks. So I figure if you're trying to look for a first-round pick, who better to go to than OKC? They have Miami's pick in 2021, but it was circumstantial. So if Houston's pick lands between 5 and 30, then they would get Houston's pick and probably their own pick. If Houston's pick lands in the top 4, then they won't get Miami's pick. So we put that condition that if it's Miami's pick, because Aram told me I want it to be a good pick. So if it's Miami's pick, then he'll take it. If not, then it switched to Phoenix's pick.
Yep, exactly that. And then on OKC's perspective, we're giving up a first-round pick. So I was OKC as well. But in return, we got 2 second-rounders, and we got Grant Williams in a separate trade into our trade exception. So that was a positive for Oklahoma City, getting a young player in Grant Williams, who's on the end of Boston's rotation currently. And then Boston, maybe Anil, you can speak on Boston's behalf since you had Boston.
Yeah, for sure. So Boston, they're going to give up Grant Williams and a second-round pick, but in return, they get a lot of help for this season. So again, Denver had no more assets to give out. So the way that we finagled everything, they ended up receiving George Hill from OKC because OKC doesn't really need George Hill. And then they ended up getting Robin Lopez, who's on an expiring deal from Washington. And both of them fit into the $28.5 million trade exception, and they waived Jeff Teague. So that's how we made it work. Even with Denver having limited assets, we got very creative, and we were able to make it work.
Wow, guys! I mean, kudos for that deal, because 4 teams and making the picks work and just kind of working that way around. I know that wasn't easy and it took a lot of work. So that's definitely our highlight of the exercise. That's kind of like, if we're kind of pitching this idea to someone, that's like our real selling point, is like, you can make a deal with Bradley Beal and you be a Rom and you can drive a hard bargain and ask for them, to the moon in assets. So, all that is a great time for sure. I know for me, my biggest acquisition was probably Oladipo. So I was in charge of a few teams here. Dallas, Miami, I had various, expectations and goals. And, Oladipo was definitely a big one, bringing into Miami, since, there's been interest there, and, they're looking for that last piece, so to speak, to kind of solidify that championship rotation. So I really wanted to bring him on the team. And then, Anil, I'm glad that you brought up the Stipian role as one of our big difficulties we encountered. I actually had 2 teams that were really hamstrung by, a bunch of pick 7 protections, Dallas and Miami. So I'll definitely go ahead and put that in the category of difficulties and make things a little bit tougher. It was a little bit circumstantial for me, since I had, one of the only teams with that situation, but Denver was another one. So, basically when we say that is, if there is a team that has multiple picks that are supposed to be protected, you cannot, deal another pick that's kind of connected to those if it's like the year before or after, because there can't be a possibility that you're without a first round pick in 2 consecutive years. So that's definitely something I would say if someone's doing an exercise and you encounter one of those 2 or 3 teams, you definitely have to be on the lookout for that for sure. But, overall, I was able to kind of make it work. And, of course, there's second round picks you can deal. And, maybe you just have to find a first from another team, as Anil did, to try to gather another pick. So there's ways that you can definitely get around that for sure if you're trying to make that work. But overall, for this one of our last segments here, I wanted to really just touch on maybe some things we would do differently or change if we did this exercise again. And this is really for anybody that has any thoughts on this. If we were to do this again, is there anything you guys would change about the scheduling of the timeline we followed, the way we split up teams, anything of that nature that might make things a little bit easier on us as we're going through this process?
I would say I would change the way that I pick my teams. I picked teams that I really liked, that I was pretty high on, and it ended up messing me up in the long run because I really wasn't able to make a deal. So I think that the process was really phenomenal. I thought it was well thought out, and I just would have changed where I went, my strategy for picking.
I would say 2 things. One is reminding ourselves that sometimes you don't have to make a trade. Obviously, we're in a mock trade exercise, and so it's fun to make trades, and you want to pull off trades. But you know, a lot of teams will go through the trade deadline and not make a trade because the right trade isn't available. But in terms of our exercise and how we conducted it, I thought it was done really well, and we were changing the cap sheets and the trade machine as we were going. So it was dynamic, because if you're not doing that, then the first trade might be great and work, but then the following trades may not work, but you think that they work because you're basing it on the original criteria. So I thought that we did a good job there. Where I would make a tweak is maybe introducing more GMs so that we all would have less teams on our plate. I think having 3 teams on our plate would probably be a good position. So maybe having 10 people, 3 teams each, so you could really concentrate and focus. Because, I mean, I didn't make a trade for the Knicks, and I feel like they could have done something just to help a team because they have so much cap space, or they have some cap space. So I feel like I didn't really give my full effort to all 6 teams, and maybe that's something that we could improve for future.
I definitely agree with that, Anil. We were all I think we faced a similar issue. We were splitting our attention between 6 teams or 4 teams. And when you're doing that, you maybe don't explore every opportunity that every team has in front of them. So, as a result of that, maybe the Knicks are not involved in the deal, even though they are very interested in acquiring more assets and things like that. Because, you might end up having multiple contenders like Chanel Gen, you can't really make a deal, or you have a bunch of sellers and things like that. So, definitely some difficulties, with that. But I love that you guys brought up those ideas, and that kind of also flows into advice we might offer to people that want to do this, because there are other organizations out there. Maybe there's other groups that do a podcast, or other groups that are just trying to break into basketball. So, we want to be here, of course, to have fun with this. We want to be able to kind of demonstrate some of the skills that we've learned as well as going through like sports business classroom and all that stuff. But also, we want to give people the opportunity to learn from us. So, does anybody have any ideas about maybe some advice you offer?
Aaron, I'm not 100% sure what you said because there's a lot of crackling. So I don't know if that fully came through, but I'm going to assume that you said any advice for people who would be trying to do a similar exercise. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would say, you know what? Go to notradeclause.com. Get familiar with the tools that we have available, because we have team sheets, which are extremely helpful. But not only just team sheets. In the team sheets, you're also going to find information about non-guaranteed contracts, dead salary, so that you can be mindful of how much dead salary you can take on. You have the draft capital, you have trade exceptions and disabled player exceptions. You're going to need a full scope and understanding of a lot of these different components in order to pull off like a mock trade deadline exercise. And I feel like no trade clause, our site, No Trade Clause, has a lot of the tools that you would need in order to pull something like this off.
Yeah, I felt like having those tools specifically for our trade and the Kyle Lowry trade, and then also even better with the trade exception was the PJ Tucker trade. It was so simple, it was so easy, and we couldn't have done that without the resources that we had. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was super fun, and I think that if we went back and rewound and did this again, some of us would have probably done some things differently. So I think as a collective, each of us has probably learned and grown from this. And for those who who are listening and haven't been exposed to Sports Business Classroom, this is the type of exercise that you would get from the Draft Academy that they're doing next week, and the one that they do in the summertime, usually at Summer League. So yeah, that's where we all came from. That's where we were able to learn some of the things that we were able to put into practice here. But overall, I think it was an awesome experience. All of us really, really enjoyed it. I know me personally, I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to seeing next week when Sports Business Classroom hosts the Draft Academy, what type of trades they put in place. And then also for the real NBA, what type of trades actually go down, and then we can compare it with the trades that we conducted here. So with that, that kind of concludes our podcast on the mock trade deadline. Check out our social media page, Instagram and Twitter, for more information about some of the trades that we were able to pull off. Ali, shout out to Ali, who put together some graphics to really visualize that. And stay tuned on notradeclause.com, where we have all the information that you'll need in order to pull something like this off, and also a trade machine that will be coming out next week as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all you guys who've been on the pod today.
Thanks for having us.